Hi everyone, and welcome to Earth Live Lessons at the Edinburgh Science Takeover. This is the second day of the Edinburgh Science Takeover. My name's Laura. I'm sure you saw the amazing, well, almost as good as mine lesson by my colleague Graham yesterday, talking about Scottish wildlife. So who am I? Why am I here? I work for Edinburgh Science that runs, every year we run the Edinburgh Science Festival. Now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run it this year to make sure we keep everyone nice and safe in this difficult time, but we have an amazing online festival of which I am now a part, which is very exciting. So be sure to check out our website to see more exciting things that you can watch and try for yourself and your families over the Easter holidays. So I usually work in our creative team. I work usually for our international projects, but today I'm working a little bit closer to home. Actually in my home, in my bathroom, sitting in my bath. So one of the things I really love about working for Edinburgh Science, and especially as part of my team, is we're really encouraged to explore all of the different aspects of science that we enjoy. And as you might have guessed from my wetsuit, I really enjoy scuba diving, and I love all of the animals that live under the sea. Oh, hi Lauren, George, and Melissa. I'm trying to watch your chats. I might get distracted by telling you really exciting things about corals. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. And if I don't notice it straight away, we'll hopefully have a bit of time to answer some questions at the end. And I'm also going to pop in the link with the magic of technology, my Twitter handle. So if anybody has any really complicated questions, we can talk about them a little bit later on. So yeah, I love scuba diving. Obviously, didn't just buy the kit for no reason. And one of my favorite places to go scuba diving is on coral reef, and usually a tropical coral reef, because let's be honest, I live in Scotland. When I go on my holidays, I want to go somewhere a little bit warmer. I love seeing dolphins and particularly turtles. So last year I was able to take a bit of time off and go to Costa Rica and volunteer with sea turtles, which was amazing. So I might mention them a little bit today as well. So when we think about coral reefs, we probably think tropical, nice and warm, nice and sunny, white sandy beaches, blue clear water, turtles hopefully, and lots of bright colours. And that's absolutely right. Quite often, usually I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I've got some of my marine biologist friends watching, so they'll be able to jump in and tell me I've got it all muddled up. So yeah, we have our corals in shallow, warm water in warm places. But we also get corals in very deep water, so deep water where it might not be safe for me to dive, and in cold waters. So we get corals off the west coast of Scotland, so I would have to wear something a little bit warmer than a dry suit if I wanted to go and visit them, which hopefully later on in the year, maybe next year, I'll be able to. So before I get started in talking about ecosystems and threats to coral reefs, let's go back to basics. What on earth is a coral? A bit of a challenge to do this with only things that I have in my bathroom. So a coral, they're brightly coloured, probably seen them in Finding Nemo, things like that. Soft, squishy animal. So it's called a polyp, or more usually lots and lots of polyps. They're little. So imagine this, what is it, a little bath spongy thing, is made of lots of little tiny squishy animals called polyps. Brilliant. And what these polyps sometimes will do is they'll filter food. It looks a bit better if I do it this way. They'll filter food out of the water and eat it. Okay, so far so good. But what these polyps also have in our tropical shallow water corals in particular, they have a type of plant, well, an algae living inside their bodies. And I'm going to try and demonstrate this. Imagine this lovely, brightly coloured shower gel is our algae, and it's right all mixed in there inside our polyp tissues. It would be impossible to separate them. I couldn't just go along and pick a bit of algae off. And that is our coral. A bit weird. They look better. They look better in the wild. And what these soft, squishy polyps and their algae flatmates often live on, if they're a hard or a stony coral, is they have a bit of a stony skeleton. So it looks like a rock or a stone, but it's actually made out of something called calcium carbonate. Remember that, because we're going to come back to that later. I'll put my coral down now. So threats to our coral reefs and our coral reef ecosystems. There's two or three, should check my notes better. There's three main threats to coral reef ecosystems that I'm going to be talking about today. And unfortunately, all of them are human-made, which is pretty bad, but is good news because it means we can do something about it. So our first threat is plastic pollution, and specifically microplastics. And I watched a couple of days ago a wonderful Earth Live lesson from someone I used to work with, actually, Jasper Hamlet at FIDRA, talking about nurdles. So I've got some nurdles too, Jasper. And these little plastic pellets, let's see if I can hold them up to the camera. There we go. These little plastic pellets are basically everything that's made of plastic is made out of these. So these, what else have I got in my bathroom? This comb when I'm conditioning my hair in the shower. Looking great at the moment, sure you'll agree. Will have originally been made out of plastic pellets like this. And these plastic pellets are transported all around the world and made into all sorts of useful stuff. Actually, part of my snorkel and my mask will have been made out of pellets. Maybe not white ones, probably clear ones. And these are taken around the world. They're dyed and they're molded. And they are quite useful, but sometimes people are not as responsible with them as they should be. And these little plastic pellets or nurdles can end up going into the sea. They're transported around by boat, and it does happen. And Jasper will have, I think he's watching actually, Jasper will have all the numbers, so be sure to go back and watch his video, because sometimes these will end up going overboard and ending up in the sea. And they get broken down and they get eaten by, could be our corals filtering things out of the water, could be small animals like crabs and shrimps, things like that. And that's what we call primary microplastics. So microplastics is just a fancy way of saying little bits of plastics. That's what micro means. It means little bits. And you also get something called secondary microplastics. And that is when something like, oh, I'll use this for an example. Maybe my snorkel, maybe it breaks and I end up putting it in the bin and it goes to landfill. And somehow all that rubbish from the landfill ends up in the sea. And the sea breaks it down into smaller and smaller pieces. That's pretty bad news. The exact same thing can happen to our poor corals. And even bigger bits of plastic, like I'm sure you've seen this before, but imagine this plastic bag. I'll give this a shake. Ooh, make it try and look like the sea a bit. This little plastic bag floating along, it's ended up in the sea, it's blown off a boat, it's blown off the coast after we've had our fish and chips. It looks a little bit like a jellyfish. Now, if you're a turtle, and I promise I've mentioned turtles because they're my favourites, all 7 species of them. If you are a turtle, you absolutely love to eat jellyfish. Oh, brilliant. Jasper's just come up and said, an estimated, wow, 230,000 tons of nurdles are lost to the environment every year across the world. So that's even more than I thought. That's pretty shocking. Yeah, so we've got a jellyfish. No, not a jellyfish. We've got our turtle, comes along, they're pretty hungry, and they think, yummy, a jellyfish. Because if you're a turtle, then jellyfish is what you want to eat. And you eat it, and you start chomping down, and you and me, if we were tucking into our fish and chip supper, we quickly realise, actually, we're eating a plastic bag, and we'd be able to spit it out. Now, a turtle, what they've got in their mouth and in their throats, they've got these spikes. I knew this comb would come in handy. And they've got these spikes, and they point this way. So if you're a turtle trying to eat a jellyfish, oh, let me point this way. If you're a turtle trying to eat a jellyfish, it's great because the jellyfish just goes right down the hatch into your tummy, lovely full belly, go on your way. But if you eat a plastic bag, that plastic bag, you can't spit that out. You can't spit that out through the little spiky bits on your tongue and in your mouth. So that's going to get stuck and that's going to go into your stomach and that's going to fill you up, but it's not actually going to give you any nutrition because it's not really food. Oh, Lizzie's just said we've got a question on Twitter. How easily can you find nurdles on our beaches? Well, if you go to the, I think it's nurdles.co.uk, I'll pop the links here. It'll tell you all about how you can join in with the Great Nurdle Hunt, which happens every year all over the world, I think. And unfortunately, pretty easy to find nurdles on beaches. Because of the tides and ocean currents and things, some beaches are more full of nurdles than others. So check out the link. There's some great maps and some great photographs. I'll give you more information about that. And yeah, I'll try and catch you on Twitter later as well. So yeah, so our poor turtles, they've got nurdles to contend with. They've got plastic bags to contend with. It's really pretty difficult. But as people, there's lots and lots of things that we can do. We can think about using alternatives to plastic, and we can think about making sure that we dispose of our waste responsibly. So we can reduce the amount of plastic things that are being made, and we can also do what we can to make sure that any plastic that is made isn't ending up in the sea. So if that wasn't bad enough with our plastic, there's more things, more challenges facing our poor corals. And there's two things that I want to talk about that face corals in particular, but of course the corals are where all of our other animals, our fish, our anemones, plants as well, let's not forget about them, our sharks, our turtles, our dolphins, things like that, this is where they all live, or near where they live, or the things that they eat like to live. So it's really, really all interconnected. So anything that damages corals damages pretty much everything that lives in the sea. So two things I'd like to talk about is I'd like to talk about ocean acidification and coral bleaches. Sorry, I'm just reading the live chat here. I'm getting distracted. So coral bleaching is what happens when corals, instead of being their lovely bright colour, I'm sorry, this green is looking a bit snotty green rather than lovely bright coral green, is when our corals, instead of being the lovely bright colours that they're supposed to be when they're healthy, they turn sort of grey and bleached, like you might think the name suggests. And this happens when water gets too warm. So as you probably know, as I'm sure some of the other brilliant people who've been chatting on the Earth Life lessons have already said, climate change is being caused by human beings putting more and more carbon emissions, so gases like carbon dioxide, into the air. And that is causing our world to heat up. And if our air and our world heat up, well, our waters and our seas are going to heat up as well. Now, I could talk about this for ages, but I've only got about 5 minutes left. I'm not going to go into the science of climate change here, but I hope, sure somebody else has already done it. We've got 100 people talking over this week. So yeah, so the water gets warm and our polyps, remember that live on the stony structure of the coral and have the algae living inside them, they get stressed. And it's not like you and me, we're big complicated mammals. When we get stressed, we do all sorts of weird things. But corals, scientists describe them as being stressed, and the only thing they can do is they can expel, is that going to work? Oh, they expel the algae from their tissues. Now, I don't know if they squeeze it out quite like that, but they expel the algae from their tissues. And that's pretty bad because the algae, just like green plants on the land, the algae do something really clever called photosynthesis. And that's a way of saying that they get energy from the sun. So our polyps might get energy from eating little things in the water, and our algae can make their own energy from sunlight. And that's two things that a coral needs to keep it alive. So as you can imagine, if they spit out the algae and they don't have that anymore, then they're really going to struggle and our coral is going to die. And unfortunately, this is something that is happening all around the world right now. So I've just had a question from Emily. Do you think our corals will adjust to temperature change in time? And that's a really interesting question, because there are some species of corals that are what we call much more resilient. So they're much better able to survive bigger changes in temperature. And there's lots and lots of exciting projects going on now trying to, I'm not sure if plant is the right word, but trying to sort of plant some of these corals, trying to grow some of these corals in captivity and put them back out into wild reefs to try and help restore the reefs. So yeah, there's lots of interesting projects going on and scientists trying sort of different things. So the last threat that I'd like to talk about is also caused by climate change, and it's something called ocean acidification. So acidification is just a way of saying something becomes more acid, more acidic. So an acid is something like vinegar or lemon juice or acid in our stomachs that helps us digest stuff. Pretty useful in its right place. And as temperatures rise, I said before, we're getting more carbon dioxide in the air. More carbon dioxide in the air means we're going to have more carbon dioxide being dissolved into our water. And when you mix carbon dioxide and water, so water which is H2O, remember, for anybody doing scientific formulas as we go along, that makes a slightly acidic solution. So that doesn't mean that when I jump into the sea, it's going to suddenly taste like lemon juice or it's going to sting my skin and my eyes like vinegar would. It just means it's slightly more acidic. And that's a problem because most creatures that live in the sea have a shell or a skeleton made out of calcium carbonate. Remember, I mentioned that right at the beginning. I said that was going to be important. So this is a shell that I just picked up on the beach in East Lothian a few weeks ago when I was out walking with the dogs. So it's a good example. And the same is true for tropical shells as well. Just not usually allowed to bring them home. So this animal, this scallop, I think it maybe was, has a shell made out of calcium carbonate. And all of our different bivalves and mollusks, your mussels and snails and all the squishy-bodied animals with shells that live in the sea have a shell of calcium carbonate. And our coral, if it's a stony or hard coral, also has a skeleton made out of calcium carbonate. Another thing that has a shell made out of calcium carbonate is hen's egg. So I cooked some breakfast for my partner, my flatmate, the other day, saved the eggshells to do a little experiment. So I'm going to crush this calcium carbonate eggshell. I'll try and hold it where you can see it. Put it into this little jar. And then we're going to imagine that we've got some seawater that's slightly more acidic, so made of slightly more acid than our shell is used to. So I've got some acid here. Okay, it's vinegar. It's just vinegar, nice and safe. And I'm going to pour this into here. And then we're going to wait 5 years for it to take effect. No, what I've got here is this. I put this together just before I started recording. So that's 19 minutes ago. And you can probably already see the vinegar is looking a bit cloudy and there's lots and lots of bubbles. And that's because our acid is dissolving our calcium carbonate shell. Now, I've used vinegar to make sure that we have something to see here, but this is what's happening in nature right at the moment. Our slightly acidic seawater is dissolving the shells of our sea creatures or preventing them from. So yeah, low note, just to end on a cheer note, I just want to reassure you that actually there are a lot of science, a lot of work on something called micropropagation. Propagation is just a fancy way of saying growing or planting. Micro, like I said before, really, really small. So they are planting and growing really, really small bits of coral that are more resilient. So they are more able to stick up for themselves when it comes to ocean acidification and coral bleaching, and they're trying to repopulate the coral reefs around our world. So I think we're just at the 20 minutes mark. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions before I say goodbye. And then if people want to come and join me on Twitter, we can have a bit more of a chat. Someone is Casebo is saying, what is one thing we can do to help our oceans? Oh, that's from Jennifer. So I think probably there's lots of different things that we can do. Some of the things would be to look at how we can reduce our carbon footprint, our carbon emissions. So just try and reduce our impact on the world in terms of climate change. We can also look at reducing single-use plastic. If you're looking for something practical that you can do, if you live near the coast, or in a few months' time when you're able to travel to the coast again, the Marine Conservation Society also run beach cleans. So that's a lovely practical thing you can do to help animals immediately. But yeah, have a look at the Edinburgh Science website, particularly our All Fired Up and our water strands, and there'll be lots and lots of other people talking about amazing projects and lots of amazing things that you can get involved in. And yeah, I'm running over time, so I just want to say thank you so much to Lizzie for setting this up, and hope everybody has a lovely Easter and keep watching Earth Life Lessons.